Theo J. Wilson. So before we begin with your journey, I just based on that piece that you put out there, I wanted you to give us the key takeaways that you wanted us to receive from that.
Listen, thank you for playing that one. I wasn't quite sure which one you were going to play. That was inspired by James Baldwin,
Yeah, okay, makes sense.
because James Baldwin probably was one of the clearest thinking cultural critics of the structure of white supremacy and how it affects folks in this country. And one of the things that he said was that y'all ain't really white per se. Whiteness is an artifice. It is a construction of humankind that was there to put people of European descent and those who fit the description of whiteness above and supreme to those who did not. The very construct was there to other folks. And the timing of that video was right after Charlie Kirk's assassination,
Mm,
where Charlie Kirk made one of his statements came to light, where he said that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was anti-white. And a lot of the people who agreed with Charlie Kirk and who were grieving Charlie Kirk at the time were putting that out there as exemplary of what America should go for and towards. And I said, this is what happens when you teach history without context.
yes.
Because if the Civil Rights Act was anti-white, whiteness is anti-everyone else. And therefore, it was meant to be inclusive of those who were on the outskirts of the definition of whiteness. It has nothing to do with discriminating against people of European descent. Rather, it's there to include those who were discriminated against. And until we have a reckoning with that, then what's crazy to me is in this resurgent MAGA era that we're living in, the very people who don't want to be reminded of racism in the past by suppressing its lessons become racist in the present.
Wow.
So, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's hustling backwards, one of my favorite phrases, because I see what would the blowback be. So that was the impetus for that video.
Okay, and thank you for that. The racist podcast who dropped out of college, who got popped like popcorn. Yeah.
Damn, I ain't gonna get into that.
Yeah, yeah. So, but let me ask you this, just based off of what was mentioned. Do you believe that there is more Black dependency than white supremacy?
Black dependency in what way?
In the sense of, like, a lot of times when we talk about, when we equate white supremacy, and to me, and it's just my opinion, it may not, and it may not resonate with others, but just my personal opinion. I think a lot of times, a lot of Blacks, a lot of, not all, they associate white supremacy and trying to justify their inability to exceed or to succeed or to excel. I think they use the whole white supremacy theory as a means of tearing each other down, but yet they want to model after, those standards. So I just kind of want to kind of use that as a reference, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. What your question is. My short answer is no, and I'm going to give you my long answer to that. Black people have been socialized to feel as if there is something inherently wrong, lazy, or dependent about us because it is a projection, largely from the folks who've been dependent upon the system of white supremacy in general for the last 400 years. And I'll put it like this. The slave master was more dependent upon slavery than the slave himself. You never seen a master run away from the plantation. And in that respect, the slaves were freer. The systems of white supremacy have made white folks dependent upon the advantage that it artificially gives them. Black people historically have showed superhuman resilience in the face of it. Superhuman resilience. I referred to this teaching by Dr. Joy DeGruy Leary, who wrote a book called Post-Traumatic Slavery Syndrome. And what she says is that when you look at the dysfunction of Black folks, because of course there is dependency on the welfare state, of course there is a class of us who are race hustlers who make excuses for our failures rather than taking direct action to remedy our dysfunction. However, largely speaking, Black people's resilience is on scary level
Mm.
because we have we got to give ourselves credit.
But it's kind of suppressed sometimes. But go ahead.
Yeah. No. If you look at how other peoples who encountered the raw wrath of white supremacy fared, if you're looking at other indigenous peoples, other peoples who were eradicated, the Tasmanians eradicated, right? To a large extent, most Native American tribes and their numbers eradicated. They did not face that machine coming out the other side playing blues, gospel, and funk. They did not face that machine
Right.
hitting above their weight. When you look at the Dalits of India, this is the one who is in the bottom class of the Indian caste system. You have a situation where they haven't punched above their weight, haven't created a Martin Luther King, anything like that. And their whole entire, now let me speak fairly of these folks. They've had movements and they've had leaders of those movements, but those movements have not made the headway that ours have. So if you economically cripple a people, divorce them from their history, enslave them for 400 years, and when that slavery is emancipated, and shackle them in Jim Crow and in convict leasing and in sharecropping, and they still somehow manage to create the space to find themselves in the highest levels of government in that very society, that means that you're up against a superhuman people. And so for the small minority of us who race hustle, who blame Whitey for every damn thing, you have mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters in the community creating after school programs. And you have Black men who are fighting their way through the hood to go to college. You have a large percent of us who show abnormal resilience in the face of these things that these other folks complain about. And I found that conservative media outlets have profited from the Jesse Smolets of the world, have profited from those, you see what I'm saying, who fake race hustle to make it, to deflect from the idea that they still have culpability in the system that needs to be dismantled. So there's a few race hustlers, by far more resilient survivors and thrivers in our community. That's what I say about that.
And well said, by the way. And but I want to ask you, and I know I might get some backlash for this, but honestly, yeah, I don't care. But what my thing is that to me, and I don't know about you, and I want to ask you this because do you really truly believe that we are benefiting from being integrated? But do you believe that we are benefiting from being integrated? Because we were better off when we were segregated. I mean, we were kind of. I mean, especially after when we talk about Black Wall Street and the Renaissance, and you go back into those period times. Like, do you think we're benefiting from integration? Because
I think it's a very double-edged sword. If you talk to the Black folks who are alive, our elders who survived Jim Crow, they'll tell you two stories. The story about how within our community, it was warm, there was trust, there was cooperation, there was businesses built. And on the outside of our community, you had the formation of large-scale white spontaneous mob violence who could destroy our lives. And I don't think we in the integration era fully appreciate the monster that was mob white violence. I don't think we fully appreciate what that thing was. Because when you look at the fact that lynchings were public activities, that they were photographed, when you look at the fact that they were advertised in newspapers, put in church pamphlets, when you have the idea that at any point, no matter how well off you were in a Black society, a white child could accuse you of something and you end up hanging from a tree. When you look at the fact that Black business owners were often the highest targets of spontaneous mob lynch violence, in the integration era, us putting that under our heel, creating anti-hate crime legislation, the NAACP, the Urban League, and these things bought us the latitude to speak as woke, Malcolm, and militant as we want, dang near, in this age, until social media censorship was a thing. So in a way, integration bought us a avenue to speak real Malcolm out here without the fear of the KKK actually showing up at your door for real,
But
for a
they,
Molotov cocktail coming through your window for real, for real.
but they
You see what
still,
I'm saying?
they're still around us though. They still, they may not be as, but they still, yeah, they're still lurking. I
Oh,
will.
of course they do. And what you have over the internet is black folks knocking them out. I did a report on this with the African Diaspora News Channel, but realistically, think about that, right? Now, I'm going to get into the downside of integration in a second.
Okay.
So don't think that there isn't a downside. You are correct in perceiving the fact that we've lost something in this experiment. But let's just appreciate the fact that, like, they call you an N-word. You still to this day got the latitude to break their jaw and claim hate crime legislation and get away with it because of the fact that our ancestors who fought for integration bought us this latitude. I mean, look here. And like white people know, like, yo, if you throw the N-word out, you take your own chances at that point. You see what I'm saying? And all over the internet, chin checks, FAFO stories, get knocked out, drop, all kind of stuff is happening because black folks don't take that no more. Integration actually bought us that.
But that's the thing, Theo. But what about those who, that on the reverse side, that the blacks calling these people crackers and spicks, and all is it the accountability goes both ways?
Oh yeah, and I've seen it go both ways. Listen, there was a video recently of this brother mouthing off with this little short Mexican dude at some restaurant. That Mexican dude dropped him down. It was a co-up, bam, drop that brother. It was a one-hitter quitter. So like we like you know what I'm saying. For example, I grew up with essays. I grew up with Mexicans. So you know what I'm saying. If you call a Mexican that word,
let that fool you. Don't let that
you take your chances. You know what I'm saying. So I don't think that it's the latitude or you know what I'm saying. Like calling white folks out of their name. Black folks don't like that either. Like if you call a white person their racial slur and there's no like, you know what I'm saying, intention behind it, you just do that because you're mad. Black folks actually largely frown on that as well. So I want to make it clear, I've seen it go both ways. And they brother mouthed off at that Mexican, it was a rapper, bruh. So
Yeah.
you know, so here's what I will say. What integration took away from us needs to be analyzed. Integration largely took away our solidarity. When we had the latitude to move out of black neighborhoods, the first ones who could do it was the ones who afforded to. Well, that actually dropped the value of those neighborhoods and their homes, right? Left us open for gentrification, right? You have a situation now where we never addressed our internalized self-hatred, right? We have internalized self-hatred. How could you not? After 400 years of being told that you are less than.
But it's plenty of self-hatred. But how do you rise above that? But when you talk about gentrification, I have my views on that too. Because I don't, to me, I'm more here with it with gentrification than I am here with it. I know some people may disagree, but I'm here for it more so than not. Because it seemed like that's what it takes for us as especially blacks as a whole to even have access to certain resources or access to certain things that we don't even want to even inquire about, because all we want to do is they inquire about alcoholic beverages, all kind of drugs and junk food, but they don't, we endorse more of those things. We endorse more of the alcohol, we endorse more of the weed, we endorse more of everything else that is so detrimental to all of us, but then they complain about gentrification, which benefits the community as a whole.
Let me ask you something, sister. When I throw out the term redlining, what does that mean to you?
Redlining? As far as...
Okay, so redlining was the government and banking practice of literal ghettoization. So I'm going to throw myself in the mix here. I'm from a black neighborhood in Denver, Colorado called Park Hill. Park Hill was a part of an exhibit that they had at the museum here called The History of Redlining in Colorado. What redlining literally did was real estate developers back in like post-World War II, and even before that, would take real estate maps and draw red lines around black communities and say, do not invest in these places. Do not put resources, There were toxic loans called contract buys. Chicago was ghettoized because of these. And what ended up happening was that you had a creation by government policy. We were excluded from HUD. We were excluded from loans that could actually appreciate our houses. And largely what ended up going on was that we were trapped in cycles of poverty. And I want you to look at this. You've heard of inheriting wealth, right? My granddaddy died and he left me $1 million.
Right.
You can also inherit poverty. Now, I think one of the things that we have to be careful of as Black folks is internalizing our dysfunction. And here's what I'll say. The very things that you see Black people suffering from right now, crime, drugs, teenage pregnancy, alcoholism, were exactly the fate of white people 100 years ago when they were ghettoized, the Italians, the Irish, the Polish, when they were trapped in the bottom of the economic spectrum before they were assimilated into whiteness. Well, 100 years ago, the gangsters wasn't in Chirac. They weren't Black, were they? They were Al Capone. It wasn't crack. It was alcohol, the bootlegging, and the bullets flew the same. The death was the same. The crime rate and the murder was all white on white crime. So what we have known for the longest time is that if you trap people in the cycles of poverty, certain things happen to them.
Yes, I agree with that. Yes.
So that's why I wanted to ask about redlining, because what I see in my community, and this is what we did, because like my neighborhood was a blood neighborhood. There was bloods everywhere. Sometimes when I speak, I'll be like, "What up, blood?" You know what I'm saying? Because I came from a literal gang-infested neighborhood. A lot of my homies are dead now.
Colorado?
Yeah, because
really?
a lot of the because a whole lot of the G's from California, when they were either escaping or whenever the prison system sent them out of the state, they landed in Denver and hit our Black neighborhoods like an invasive species. So I grew up under gangbanging. They used to call us Baby LA. And in my neighborhood, we blamed ourselves. It didn't come out that my neighborhood was redlined, divested from, and intentionally impoverished by our banking industry until after the year 2000. It's when they finally admitted it. So in the meantime, in the 80s and in the 90s, everybody creeping in blood, and we see crack, we see alcohol, we see hood stuff, we see buildings dilapidating, and we blame us. But the fact is, if you trace it a little further, the things that affect poor people, addiction, violence, can be traced back to the intentional creation of poverty.
Yeah, and that rings true. I mean, even more so now. You know, when we talk about poverty, and it's not a justification, but it's our reality, right? So yeah, I do agree with that. Yeah, but I really appreciate you adding your perspective on what I was asking about, because that was something I was looking forward to hearing from you when I was kind of doing a little bit of brainstorming. So I was hoping that I would get your perspective on those things. So
and let me just say one more thing before. Thank you, sis. And let me just say one more thing before we leave this subject, right? When a Black man kill a Black man, he going to jail. Like, it ain't even no question. When Tyreek killed Jamal, Tyreek going away. Black people are often held accountable for their crimes. In fact, to a disproportionate degree, to the point where we have the Truth in Sentencing Project. We find white guy killed a dude, second degree murder. Black guy killed a dude, second degree murder. And we found in the Truth in Sentencing Project, so these boys both killed. They both going away, being held accountable for their acts. But we found time and time again that judges would often give 2 to 3 times the sentences for the Black offender for the exact same crime. So we're held accountable. If we leave our babies behind, you know what I'm saying, child support be coming, you know what I'm saying? If we fail as people, there is often accountability, more often than not, accountability for us, as there should be.
Right.
As there should be.
Yes.
So this ain't me saying, no, we should be held accountable.
And we are. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and we are. We literally are held accountable more often than not. So I just wanted to put that out there.
And more often, accountability is on us, is more highlighted, is more on Front Street than it is for whites. Because whites are, a lot of people may not believe this, but whites are held accountable as well. But it's not it's more foreshadowed to me. It's overshadowed the accountability of Blacks, because they always want to use us as as an example, So I mean, that does
The
tend to happen.
system is the system, and it does what it does. You know what I'm saying? So it's sad, but it's true.